everybody keep telling y'all to breathe today, but you can see why we need to breathe, and I need to breathe right now because it's a lot. So I'm gonna just take a moment. If y'all can breathe with me, that's cool too. Okay. So I want to thank all of you for coming here today. We talked about beautiful, powerful love, a celebration of the healing and transformation for Black women. And you may notice or have noticed that there are a lot of people on stage who are not Black. And of course, I sat there and as I was watching rehearsals and as I even put this together, and I said, I'm going to leave it like that because that's an opportunity to talk about two things. One, for the sisters and the brothers in the room, in the audience, or listening to the video, all of these people are local artists here in Seattle. Dora Oliveira, Mark Lilly, two people of color, two Black people. Dora's from Brazil, Mark is from US, but Mark teaches Afro-Cuban dance and song, and Dora teaches Afro-Brazilian dance and song. And I've been going to both of their classes for years, and it's part of what saved my life while I was in the hospital because I kept hallucinating thinking I was about to dance. But oftentimes, in those years I've been going to both of their classes, I'm the only woman of color in the room. And even though sometimes when I go to a West African dance class, there might be a few more, but to the point that Omi made, our history, yes, dates back to Africa, but we cannot forget the ancestors that endured and that survived the slave trade so that we could all be here. And that includes the ones that got dropped off in Cuba and the ones that got dropped off in Brazil for 100 years before they even started coming to North America. And so when I go to these classes and I learn Afro-Brazilian history and what they struggled through and how they evolved through slavery to gain independence and kept their African culture, and the same thing with Afro-Cuban, I regain a piece of myself. I regain a piece of my history. And I connect with that. And so, yes, there were a lot of people, women and men on the stage who were not people of color, but I would say to the sisters in Seattle and the brothers in Seattle, come claim your culture. Come to these classes and come learn it. I'm tired of being the only one there. The second part of that is for everyone else, for other white women, and I think especially white women, but I would say anyone of any culture and ethnicity, men or women. What you saw on the stage is an example of true allyship. They come to class and they are open to learn and don't try to dictate, well, shouldn't it be done like this? Or what about this? And what about this perspective? They leave all white privilege to the side and they come with an open heart to learn. And I very unapologetically and clearly named this event or called this event a Black women's movement for transformation and healing, and they supported that. And they stepped back, and it's not about them, but about supporting that and not feeling weird about being on a stage to honor Black women even though they're not Black women. That is what allyship is, putting aside your own stuff. It doesn't have to be women of color, which it is that too, but I could be very clear about saying Black women and they didn't take offense to that and didn't make it about them. That's what allyship looks like. And that's when they come to me and they said, how can we support you? How can we make this happen? That's allyship. And so it was important for me to address that because I know if I came to an event saying it's for Black women's transformation and I saw a lot of white women on stage, I would be like, what? So I just want to address that so that the message of what we're saying can still get through and we can lay that to the side and understand what that's for. So this book, healing is happening real time for me right now, and I'm like in the last 24 hours, I continue to get lessons. One of the things so this whole event, this book launch, the lineup, I'm like, had myself involved in all pieces of it. And you may have noticed, I was gonna dance, and I didn't take it off the slide because I wanted to speak to that. I had planned to dance in an earlier set with Power Trip and then in one later. And I realized part of the thing that I'm gonna talk about is this concept that I call plantation proverbs. And one in particular is something that a lot of Black people have heard for many, many, many generations. And it dates back to a point when we had no other choices and we had to really push through. And that's, as a black person, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And my mother would take that one step further and would say, and many of you may have heard this, don't half-ass anything that you do. And so I've lived my life with this, I gotta get it done and I gotta get it done myself, and it has to be exactly like this because it needs to be excellent because I'm representing. And even though I died in the hospital and went through everything I went through, it was very easy to slip back into that. And I found myself slipping back into that, and my husband and my kids were like, why are you trying to do so much? And at a point, my body told me, Thursday night, Friday, no, you're not gonna do all of it. You're gonna not dance. You'll dance at the party. And I had to listen to that and be obedient because I'm not trying to wind up back in the hospital or worse. And so I decided to leave that there in the slides that you saw and to speak to it because, one, I'm being vulnerable with the growth that I'm going through, and for you to see it never ends. You always are going to be challenged with an opportunity to relearn and to test what you think you've learned and what you've grown from. And so I just wanted to be able to share that, like even in this event and in this experience, I had to pull up and learn something and do something a little bit different. So I'm going to read from a couple of different parts of the book to kind of give you a sense of the message overall. This book, and I'll speak a little bit more as part of the reading of how I came to the title of Fat, Black, and Unlovable, but I just want to speak to the fact that this event is the first of a series. So we have an event coming up in November and another in December. So it's a 3-part event series, which I hope will actually go beyond that. And the event series and this movement is called Beautiful, Powerful Love. Because whatever the 3 adjectives or adverbs or words that you've carried in your heart that have given you a negative self-belief, it may not be fat, black, and unlovable, it may be something else that resonates with you or that has lived with you most of your life. We all have an opportunity to transform that to beautiful, powerful love. And that's what this event is about. That's what this event series is about. So I just wanted to also explain that relationship between the toxic beliefs, which in my case was fat, black, and unlovable, and what we all can achieve, what we all aspire to, the feeling that we all can have, which is that we're beautiful and we're powerful, and we're not only lovable, but we are love. And so we can all get there. So I'm gonna stop just free-forming and I'm gonna read for you. I don't remember the first 2 times I died. I have images in my mind reconstructed from other people's stories in my hospital records, but I don't think what I see is my memory. I see a mind movie of the facts as they occurred, but it's devoid of emotion, which lets me know it's a recreation. The doctors have explained that anesthesia can have that effect on the mind, sparing us from traumatic memories. The first time I died was November 8th, 2017 at 7:52 p.m. I had already been in the critical care unit of Overlake Hospital in Bellevue, Washington for 20 days, following an emergency open heart surgery to repair my aorta. The aorta is the large main artery that pumps blood out of your heart to every organ and cell in your body. I had an aortic dissection, a disorder in which the inner lining of the aortic wall suddenly tears and separates from the middle layer of the aortic wall. There are 2 types of aortic dissections, and I had the type that required an immediate 10-hour open heart surgery to save my life. I would later learn that it was years of uncontrolled high blood pressure that enlarged my heart and damaged and weakened my blood vessels, creating the conditions for the dissection to occur. About 20% of people who have an aortic dissection die before they reach the hospital. Given the many complications that can happen before, during, and after surgery, if the patient makes it to the hospital, a type A aortic dissection has a 99% fatality rate. When the dissection occurred, my brain and kidneys were denied their full supply of blood and oxygen. Even though I survived the surgery to replace part of my aorta, the doctors warned my husband that I may have mental or physical disabilities due to the damage my body sustained. I was in kidney failure after the surgery and required daily dialysis. However, my mental functions were slowly returning and I was recovering and regaining strength. I was just a few days from being discharged and was able to walk around the critical care unit. Based on recounts from my husband, doctors, and nurses, I just returned to my room the evening of November 8th after taking a short walk to the waiting room wearing my son's Santa hat and on a three-way call with my husband and one of our friends in New York. Shortly after going into the bathroom, and yes, I intended to potty while I was talking on the phone, my husband said I stopped talking in mid-sentence and all he could hear was the cracking sound of my phone hitting the floor. They both started shouting my name with no response. Soon they heard the nurses shouting, "Oh my God, did she break her neck? Where is all the blood coming from? In code blue." That night, as I chatted on the phone in the bathroom, my heart had suddenly stopped beating. My body collapsed towards the wall closest to the toilet, and the weight of my body sliding down pulled the string to signal the nurses that I needed assistance. That was how they found me so quickly and alerted the staff that a code blue was in progress, meaning a patient was in fatal distress. When my body hit the floor, I severely bit my tongue, creating deep gouges that spilled my blood onto the tile. The doctors and nurses were still trying to resuscitate when my husband made it to the hospital and up to my room. According to my hospital chart, it took 23 minutes of manual CPR for my heart to start beating again. The second time I died was just 8 days later on November 16th, 2017 at 3:28 a.m. So I'll pause there and I'll just fill in the gap that it happened a third time, not long, just a couple of days after Thanksgiving, where my heart stopped. And this third time, which I describe in detail in the book, I actually remember it happening, and remember my husband being there right in front of me, focusing my eyes, focusing my breath so I could stay in my body as long as possible. And I just kept saying, "I don't want to die," and he kept saying, "You're gonna live." But the sac around my heart, which I can never remember the name of it, was filling with fluid, and it was too much for my heart to take and to keep beating. So it stopped, and I was gone again. But I was fighting, and I was staying in my body as long as I could at that time. So the 3 times that I died, the first time I recovered, the second time was November 16th, I recovered. They went back in for another open heart surgery to understand what was happening, what could they find. They saw a blood clot, so they went back in. The third time I died, they went back in exploratory to find out why there was fluid, why I died again, what they could do to stop it again. They called in specialists. They did the most. And so that's why when you hear me talk about 3 open heart surgeries, the first one was to save my life from the aortic dissection. The second 2 was to save my life because I kept dying. People ask me, I'm free-forming now because I can't help it. People ask me, do you remember anything? And I do remember, like I said, the third one. But overall, with all of this in and out of my body, I felt and feel, and my husband was even coming to the hospital saying, "Your mother needs you to talk to her." And my mother passed away in 2006. And she was there, and my oldest aunt, who I never met, she passed away. My mother was the youngest of 10 girls. They were both there in the room, and the feeling I get is when you're little and you're outside playing and you're cutting up with your cousins and acting a fool, and your mama hear you, and she said, "Girl, get in this house," because you're not representing her well, and you get told a thing or two and then sent back outside to play. That's the feeling that I have of what was happening to me. I was getting snatched up. My ancestors had some words for me, which I don't remember the words, but the feeling, and I was getting sent back. That, and I was hard-headed because I kept coming out of this trying to run things and order dinner for my family, even though I'm the one in this hospital. Why was I still trying to run things? So, many people were involved with my care and gave me emotional support and encouragement. It became a regular occurrence to hear, "You are a miracle child, and you are here for a reason." From doctors and nurses alike, some of them nearly in tears, which was quite moving because medical care professionals usually don't go there, but they all went there, and I believe them. So when I think about that, and I think back to 2016, a year before this happened to me, I'd had a reading, and received messages from my ancestors. Now, you may not believe in this and the possibility of it, but I do, and what I've experienced has told me that it's absolutely true if I ever had a doubt. And one of the messages was that my ancestors wanted me to write for my healing and for theirs. And I wasn't surprised because my mother had always urged me to write when she was alive, but I didn't understand how it was going to help my ancestors in the spirit world. And because of that spiritual request and the circumstances that aligning in my life, I wrote the outline and the draft of the first chapter of this book in the spring of 2017. And I'll talk more about that in chapter 1 in the actual book. The other message from 2016 was that they wanted me to learn to finish what I start. And at the time, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I figured it might later. Both of these messages resurfaced in my mind as I recovered from that third death and third open heart surgery. And I asked the question, what am I supposed to do? And I heard, finish what I started. What did I start? You started writing this book and you started healing. And I even noticed how it switched from first person, I, my own consciousness talking to me, to you, with my ancestors talking to me. And again, it was very real for me. So on December 8th, 50 days, 3 deaths, and 3 open heart surgeries, I was discharged from the hospital and went home with the spiritual assignment. It didn't take me long to understand the connection between my lifelong toxic beliefs and my health crisis. I understood why writing about transformation was critical for my recovery, important for others to hear, and requested by my ancestors. I could see the importance of a few scientific facts that clarified my intent for this book. I nearly became one of the 50,000 Black women who die every year from heart disease-related issues. Facts from the American Heart Association, I'm not making it up. Cardiovascular disease and stroke kill women more than any other cause and disproportionately impacts African American women. Only 36% of African American women know that heart disease is their greatest health risk, and only 1 in 5 African American women believe she's personally at risk. And another fact, unrelated to American Heart Association, but still a well-proven fact, prolonged trauma modifies your DNA and is passed through generations. So then as I understood and integrated my experiences along with these facts, I could see a few truths become illuminated to me. I believe that as descendants of enslaved Africans, our ancestors' pain is held spiritually and energetically within our bodies, specifically our hearts. I believe that we must heal for our ancestors to heal. The emotional pain I feel is not just my own, but it's theirs as well. And I believe that Black people must heal collectively, together. It can't be one or the other. We all have to heal together to rise, because we're all related to an extent. This is the work that I'm here to do. I'm here to join with others on a transformational journey that is both individual and collective. We all have our own soul work to do, but we learn from and support each other through that process. I believe our ancestors' urgent plea for intergenerational healing is a call to the estimated descendants of the estimated 450,000 Africans who were enslaved and dragged to North America, and the estimated 12.5 million Africans enslaved throughout the diaspora. It is a call to other Black women who may be struggling to claim their birthright of health, joy, and success, to examine their own beliefs and thoughts. It's a call for Black men who may identify with parts of my story to reassess their programming and reclaim their birthright as well. And finally, this is a call to anyone of any ethnicity who has an open heart and is willing to step into the trauma, healing, and transformation of my journey and others to see, feel, and understand a different perspective of life. And so I write. So I'm going to catch you up, moving to a different part of the book. Last year, I was preparing to go to Brazil. I was preparing to do a lot of dance classes when I went to Brazil, and so I was very focused on losing weight. And I was very connected with my ancestors, and so the things that I had done for years before that never worked started working, and I was losing weight. And I looked in the mirror, and I saw, I looked on the scale, the scale was going down, my clothes were getting looser. I looked in the mirror, but I didn't see anything different. I looked for that amazing feeling and that thought that I always thought was going to come when I started losing weight. And I lost like 40 pounds. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to be dope. I'm really feel really good, but it didn't come. And I realized that no matter how much weight I lost, no matter how rich my life was, no matter how happy my kids were, how attentive my husband could be, how many friends I had, how successful and smart I appeared to be, I would always look in the mirror and see myself as fat, black, and unlovable. Literally, these are the words that came in my mind. Fat can mean having excess body fat or being substantial, impressive, or profitable. But somehow it had become an insult and a source of shame for me. Recent body-positive movements embrace the word as simply an adjective devoid of its negative connotations. But in my life, fat has only been used as a sharp blade meant to cut down and cause pain. And it did cut, far too deeply to simply flip it and use that word. I knew I had to transform and replace this word to hear something different and to see my true self when I looked in the mirror, to actually see my beauty. According to Webster, black has many definitions that refer to everything from simply a pigment to people of African descent. But the majority of the definitions have negative connotations, such as sad, gloomy, sinister, evil, and dirty. But despite these implied definitions, this is a word that I thought I used with my own understanding of what it meant. For me to say I am black unites me with people of color from all over the globe, particularly historically oppressed people with African ancestry. Yes, I am an African American, but to me, that's a political, geographical description of origin and circumstance. To be black is much richer and much more meaningful as a source of pride and culture. But still, as a black woman, I carried a sense of shame about being black. My decidedly black features, dark brown skin, kinky hair with full lips, hips, and butt, I embraced, while at the same time, I felt less beautiful, less desirable, and less attractive because of them. As such, I must reach deeper into the thoughts and feelings about being black to eradicate that shame and find my true essence, and to find my true power. Unlovable has the simplest definition of all, with no duality or spectrum of meaning. Not having attractive or appealing qualities that would inspire admiration or affection. I mean, wow, what do you do with that? How do you cope with that? I can tell you what I did. I looked everywhere outside of myself for evidence that I could be loved. I tested the love of others. I tried to read the degree and sincerity of love received. I demanded proof and reconfirmation of love over and over again. I withheld love from myself and for others. And I basically rejected love. Since I really didn't believe that I could be loved, my tolerance for vulnerability was near zero, and relationships would become heavy and difficult once the initial euphoria of being in love or new relationship energy would wear off. Not knowing all along that I would never fully experience the receiving, giving, or being the love that I so desperately wanted until I could love myself and truly know love. Unlovable had to go. Like a resilient weed that repeatedly destroyed any attempts of nurturing a colorful garden, Unlovable had to be dug up from the root and any traces of it dispersed into nothingness. This I must do above all else. So I started writing, at first about this core belief of fat, black, and unlovable, journeying a stream of consciousness. But it quickly turned into a mental, verbal battle with my internal critic or ego. At the time, I thought I was writing about my weight loss journey, which my ego promptly told me, you got a long way to go, what are you doing writing? So I stopped writing. But I had already awakened. The next few months would bring experiences and awareness that would pierce through the veil and force me to confront this belief head on, meaning I died 3 times. And so I would even be consumed by it, swallowed whole and digested slowly and painfully, like victims of the sand creature from Return of the Jedi, or I would dismantle it and dissolve it and start a new life free from its constant shackles and abuse. I discovered that I did not have to be controlled by this erroneous thought. I had a choice, and I chose victory over this belief. I chose its death and the death of my old self that was ruled by this thought. I choose to do the work to free my spirit. I choose life, I choose love, and so I write. And I hadn't planned this, I'm going to kind of skip ahead. I hadn't planned on writing about or reading this part, but like I said, I was experiencing just as my daughter would say, Mommy, why are you trying to do the most? So I experienced that, and so I'm living this part of it right now. And so one of the things that I looked into to understand, where did this come from? Because we're not born with this. Yes, we absorb things from the womb from our mothers, but we're still not born with this completely negative self-view. So where did it come from? And as I dived into it, and I did some work around vulnerability and shame, I really dived, and I talk about this in the book, I dived into Brené Brown's work on vulnerability and shame. And so you have to go back to your family of origin. Like Omi said, you know, what about your parents? What about your grandparents? What did you experience? What did you hear from them? And a lot of the things that I heard my parents tell me a lot were kind of these little phrases, these little quotes, these little proverbs, if you will. And the more I thought about them and dug into them, that is the reason why I call them plantation proverbs, because they're things that they heard as they were growing up, and their parents heard as they were growing up, and a lot of Black people have heard. And so, and that's also part of the reason why our ancestors want us to heal, because the things that they had to do, to say, to put in place for us to survive are no longer serving us, and it's time to let them go and to reframe them. And part of that was this idea of being superwoman, this idea of I can do and I have to do anything and I have to work really hard. And I'll just read a small part and then kind of go from there. Being Black, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. First Lady Michelle, well, former First Lady Michelle Obama said it to a group of graduating Tuskegee University students. Papa Pope said it to Olivia on season 3, episode 1 of Scandal. Black parents have drilled it into the minds of their children for decades, ever since the possibility of mainstream achievement seemed within reach. It speaks to the reality that as descendants of the enslaved, we are still subjected to political, social, educational, financial, environmental, judicial, and healthcare institutions that systematically subjugate, marginalize, and weigh down our progress and ascension. Racism and oppression have slowed the progress of Black and brown people, and many poor white people have lost their own humanity by believing in a false reality despite how destitute they may be, that their access to white privilege elevates their worth somehow. White kids are told they can be anything that they want to be, and they are told directly or subconsciously that it's their white privilege that can afford them this gift of limitless potential. And there are many white people who are unaware or in denial that they have automatically been granted this advantage based on the color of their skin. Meanwhile, Black kids are told, work hard, and when you think you're doing enough to achieve your goals, double up and work twice as hard, because you don't have white privilege on your side. For some Black kids, life is already so hard that every institution is stacked against you, and it's near impossible to stay focused and on track towards a career or an education. Then we're told, work harder. In short, stress starts to build up early in a Black child's mind, body, and life, and it's starting to be proven. In the Philadelphia ACE study, a collaborative project led by the Institute for Safe Families, it was found that children exposed to racism have worse health, struggle with concentration, and have higher risks of anxiety and depression. In fact, exposure to racism is compounded when Black parents, fictitious like Papa Pope, or real life like my parents, or world famous like the First Lady Michelle Obama, teach children that being Black means a life of working harder and striving to be smarter, only for a partial reward simply because we lack white privilege. There may not be scientific evidence proving it, but I believe that simply being Black in America, or in the world for that matter, means being exposed to racism. Therefore, the physical, emotional, and mental health of all people are negatively affected starting in childhood. And so this is just an example of some of the work and some of the diving that I had to do to kind of understand where this came from and how I can get rid of it. So when I talk about having to dig in and pull up by its roots, that means I had to go all the way to how did I formulate this? Because no one said you're fat, Black, and unlovable, but it was from a mesh of these plantation proverbs, things that were completely good intentions and were for our survival that I heard and my parents, and we've been hearing for generations. But also what I heard from society and media, and one of the other chapters I talk about in the book are these stereotypes when our enslavers define us as black women, from Mammy to Jezebel to the angry black woman to welfare queen. I've been all of those things, and I have tried to move myself out of all of those things, but the reality is I have to define myself, but I had to first understand where did I get these thoughts from and how to undo them. And so in the book, I'll also talk about the process that I went through in order to come to this, in order to arrive at the place I am now in my healing. Again, that journey is not over, but I'm opening myself up to you all in this journey to kind of share it with you. And what you saw today and what you'll see after I get off the stage is part of what that was. So the Orisha songs that many of you heard singing as the sisters were up here singing and the brothers were on the drum, those are songs of our ancestors. Those were sung in Yoruba language. Those are songs of the spirit and the energies that walk with us that helped us to survive. And so I noticed, because I was back there watching y'all, you started clapping. It's because you're feeling it. There is an energy moving through the room, and there was an energy with me in that hospital room that was helping me to still be here. And the dances of giving, of just having access to the churches in Brazil, because this was a historic thing. You saw the images that thousands of women, of black women in Brazil do this every year as part of their spiritual process, where they combine Christianity and candomblé, which is a African spiritual tradition that's practiced in Brazil. And so all of these things were a part of what helped me to still be here, and my ancestors. And all of these people that are on stage were either with me in the hospital room or with me in spirit in the hospital room, or sent something, like they were all there present with me. And I always tell this, I can joke about it now, but I was having straight hallucinations in the hospital, thinking I was literally about to go on stage, that I was about to dance, and that we were about to do a samba circle around the ICU. And I really believed, so I thought I was getting up. In some cases, I thought I was moving stuff, but that's a whole other story. So the reason why I wanted to share this book and have this reading with you, but also have it to be more than this, is because I don't want to just share the pain. Here's my pain, go deal with that. But also share the joy and the things that helped me to live and to be here, to be able to even share my story. And that's what you're seeing on stage today, and that's what you're experiencing. I'm kind of giving you a glimpse into what helped to save me. And whether it's writing or dancing or drumming or singing or actual, visual art, some artistic cultural expression and reaching back to grasp our own heritage was a lifesaver for me. And I just want to share that and offer that to other people as well. I'm checking my notes to make sure I said what I wanted to say, and I did. And I'm gonna let the party get back started so then we can get to the actual party downstairs when we all gonna dance together. And with that, I thank you.